Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Varanus podcast on the Trap Talk Reptile Network. Tonight, I'm joined with Nick Mutton. We're going to talk in all things localities, new species, and doing the right thing when it comes to breeding some of these animals. Hey, Nick, how's it going, mate?
How's it going?
Great. Yeah, we don't mess around on here. Get you straight on. You've got a lot to talk about. I probably should have hit record as soon as you come on, to be honest, because you'll be repeating yourself a lot.
Yeah, we tend to do that in the sound check, and they're like, "Why don't we just record the sound check?"
Yeah, there should be like a whole podcast of those conversations. Some of those conversations can be better than the actual podcast itself. We should just do like a behind the scenes one.
I've joked with Ryan Young, a good friend of mine, many times about like, because we'll go on a road trip or whatever. It's like, why don't we just record this? Like, this two old timer geezers talking about reptiles. Like, because you talk about some pretty interesting conversations, but
yeah. 100%. Yeah, they're the ones you want. But when you hit that record button, something happens usually, and it's not quite the same. So you're lucky to have good friends when you can have those road trips. We had a good time in Papua. Some of those experiences were just amazing. But maybe we'll touch on a few of that later. So just wait for a few more people to join. But yeah. Maybe for people that don't know Nick, or I think the locality compared to the new species is maybe not defined well in the hobby. So maybe just define the difference between a locality and then a potential new species.
These lines are very murky. Sometimes you have a locality that does end up being a new species. Sometimes it's just a locality. The single biggest indicator of what's going to be what is because what we're really talking about with all of these things is populations. You're talking about different populations of snake, a lizard, or whatever. And if populations are reproductively isolated for long enough, they begin immediately to speciate. Whether that gets, so it's not as if there is like, a bunch of species around and a bunch of just localities around. Everything is constantly in motion. So you have also things that are like in the process of becoming species, but we just happen to coincide with the time where that process is incomplete. And we might call those localities, we might call them subspecies. Where that line is poorly defined. I think it is always best to treat things that are not known as, as conservatively as possible, because you do not know. Assumption, what's the old expression? Assumption is the mother of all fuck ups. You don't just assume, this is just a locality. Well, case in point, like look at green tree pythons. Green tree pythons are at minimum 4 very diverged species. They're not even closely related at all. They're very deeply diverged species. And for 30 years, people bred them together willy-nilly because they were just localities. Nope, they were all different species. And so now you have an entire hobby that is dominated almost entirely by hybrids, because everything's a hybrid of 4 different species. Because everyone made the assumption, well, they're all green snakes sitting on a stick. They must all be the same thing. They're just different localities. And they weren't. They were different, deeply diverged species. And I'm talking very deeply diverged. The difference in genetically between an Aru chondro and a Biot chondro is orders of magnitude greater than the difference between a human and a gorilla. They are vastly different animals. Just because they're both green still and arboreal and sit on sticks in different places does not mean they're as closely related as you think. It just means that body plan and that phenotype is highly conserved because it works, which is why you can look at a fossil of a coelacanth from 300 million years ago and it looks exactly like the 2 living species coelacanth today, because it's not that species, but that body plan, that design, that way of living works so well that it did not need to change radically in phenotype. Same with crocodilians. You get all the way back to the crocodilomorphs from the Permian period, look pretty crocodile-like. And you're talking like a third of a billion years ago, and it's like, because this works. It doesn't. Things change if they need to change, and not if they don't. So the line
you got those. You got those horseshoe crabs that have been around for millions and millions of years, and they haven't changed at all from that meme that goes around on Facebook.
Yeah, horseshoe crabs are insane. Like you see fossil horseshoe crabs from 100 million years ago that are identical to the living horseshoe crabs. if you were to look at their you couldn't get DNA from a fossil horseshoe crab, but if you were to look at their DNA, they would key out to be very different species. But in terms of shape, size, body plan, and what they're doing, they're completely almost identical. But their genes will have wandered off considerably. But the genes that code for phenotypic traits, shell shape, shell height, this kind of stuff, those genes are highly conserved. Not all the genes are that conserved, but the ones that control the body plan surely are. So you would you don't make the assumption. You wouldn't say, oh well, this 180 million year old horseshoe crab fossil is the same exact species as a living horseshoe crab. That would be kind of insane. But it looks like it. But
yeah. So going back to that green tree python example, so those localities which we knew about were coming in from the importers, and most people could pretty much see what was going on with them. And Aru chondro looks nothing like your what's now called Pulcher type, from the Rajrampat and the Vogelkop. So why do you think people did just cross them together rather than just keeping the locality projects pure?
Two reasons, and that's and I hate to throw shade, but it's the truth. I guess I'm the guy who will go on these things and just tell people the truth. Early on in chondro keeping, you were lucky to get any chondros at all. You would not get anything that had any sort of locality data, generally speaking. You just got green snakes, and you were lucky to get anything, and you were lucky to keep it alive, much less get it to breed. So in the early days, I mean, they didn't have the information. So you can't really fault people. They didn't know. They're getting green snakes. It might have looked a bit different, but you don't know. If you don't know what the range of variability within a population is, you don't know where all they exist. There's just too many unknowns. You don't know. So I don't really fault those early guys, the founding fathers of the chondro hobby, because they literally didn't know any better, and you couldn't get anything. They did the best they had with what they had. And they had very good records of what they bred to what. And then that changed because the game in the Indonesian side changed, and they started importing locality chondros and baby chondros and even farm hatched chondros with locality information. That's when things got shady, in the sense that you had very, 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 very expensive mixed up chondros, and then you had comparatively far less expensive locality specific chondros. And we can't have that in the market, because that, people want to charge you a lot of money for some mixed up snake, are not that amenable to locality specific, much less expensive snakes. So they just basically did everything humanly possible to throw shade at and cast doubt on and aspersions on captive hatched and or locality chondros. And it was always the same mantra. It's like, you don't really know where anything came from. They just say that, they just make that. That's all just endlessly trying to. And the reason for that is economic, not based in any much real reality. It is just, I don't want you to buy this $300 chondro that you know where it came from. I want you to buy this $2,000 chondro that is a mixed up snake. And that's what it is. So you poison the well for public demand. And it worked spectacularly. If you look at the hobby today, it's still overwhelmingly dominated by hybrids, and they still won't even say the word hybrid. They will still call them designers. It's like, you mean hybrids? They're hybrids. You've known they're hybrids. You've always known they're hybrids. You knew they were hybrids before the paper came out that showed that they would have been hybrids. Why would you breed? The fact that they are so different from each other is self-evident. You didn't need a taxonomist to tell you there are different species of green tree python. They're so different. Why would you? The reason why you're breeding all these snakes to a biak is because the biak is obviously a different freaking snake. If they were all the same species and they were all just the same, you wouldn't be doing this. You're doing them intentionally because they're very different looking, and you're trying to get traits from this other species that you knew. So it's like their own rationale kind of undoes that argument. It's like you're not doing it because they're the same species. You're doing it because they're obviously not the same species.
So do you want to just define for everyone, because I hear this getting knocked around a lot and you've just touched on it then, do you want to define what a designer is in this hobby?
It's usually a bullshit term for hybrids. I mean, you can call it a designer retic or a designer condor or designer monitor lizard, but designer, no one wants to say hybrid, but it's almost always what they're talking about. Oh, it's a hybrid. What's a designer emerald tree boa? Somebody that bred a northern to a basin. It's like, yeah, it's like, oh, it's a designer emerald. No, it's a hybrid. Those are two different snakes. It's like, that's not, but boy, the word designer sure sounds a lot sexier than hybrid, though, doesn't it? It's like, it's a marketing term. It's trying to convince somebody to buy something they wouldn't otherwise necessarily want to buy. It's like,
perfect.
I'm kind of the mind that you don't, if you need to market and brand things to convince people to buy something, it's probably not a good product. Things that are pretty cool are generally really pretty evidently cool when you look at them. Oh, look at that. That's cool. Like, I don't need to be told what's cool because it is obviously cool. It's like, it's like, I mean, I go right for the ball python people always, but it's like, there's like so many bazillions of ball python morphs. And granted, most of them have 2 or 3 different names from 2 or 3 different people that name the same damn thing. But what you'll see is that as you go down the totem pole of how cool something is to how uninteresting and subtle something is, the names get more and more extreme. So like the things that are just like barely even noticeable get these names that are really like dramatic and everything. It's like the extreme gene. Like there's literally a thing called the extreme gene. It's like, it's not extreme. Spoiler alert, the extreme gene, not extreme at all. It's not. Like, it's like, what? It's like, this is like, there's a gene called bang. Bang. Like, if you saw something, you named your morph Bang, you'd be like, man, that's got to be really popping. Nope. I'm like, is it there? I don't even know. But it's called Bang. It's like, why is, like, because you have to market it and you have to, it's like, if you have to convince somebody that they want something, it's like, you're probably on shaky ground. And so the word designer is thrown around and to make things sound sexier than they probably should be, in my opinion.
Right, so we've annoyed
every aspect of the hobby hate me by the end of this podcast.
I was just about to say, Nick, we just need to tick all subsects of the hobby off, and then
I've got plenty of haters already. I'm like, if what I say angers people in these different sort of, I don't know if demographics is even the right word, in the hobby, it's like, what am I saying that's not true? I mean, if I'm saying truthful things and you're getting angry about the truth, what does that really mean? It's like you can get mad, but like anybody that's gonna get mad listening to any of this, and there will be some people who do, it's like I would like them, where am I wrong? And if I'm not wrong, why are you mad? It's like, I think people, I mean, we all know, everybody who listens to this has lived, life for some time now, I suppose, and you've met a lot of people, and you probably all have realized that accountability is not people's favorite thing most of the time. People don't want to have a mirror held up in front of them in their own actions, and so we want to have our fun when we don't want to be held accountable for the spin-off effects of that. And this is one of those sort of topics, I guess. It's actions have consequences, and they have consequences that reverberate down the line for other people. If you choose to engage in some of these things, you're making your choice, and you can do that. You're well within your right to do that, but your choice will affect other people downstream from you. It doesn't end with you, especially in species groups where importation is not legal or is extraordinarily limited. So you have a very limited closed gene pool. I mean, if you piss in the gene pool, anybody goes swimming in that pool later is going to be, it's still going to be there, isn't it? There's nowhere to, you're not, so if you hybridize your New Caledonian geckos, which is a rampant problem to the point of basically almost having destroyed the gene pool of Leachianus and some of this stuff, like, where are you going to get some new Leachianus blood to fix what you did? Oh, you're not. So what does that mean? It means that the coolest, biggest gecko on the planet that is super desirable, that in 10 years from now, some new hobbyist is going to get in the hobby and they're not going to be able to get a Grand Terra gecko. They're not going to be able to get one that's reliably the right species because everybody now is having too much fun making designer leachies and stuff. And their fun is they're pursuing what they find fun now, denies any future hobbyist the ability to pursue what they might find as fun. They're taking that choice away from future generations. So and if you don't, it's like, this is not actually up for debate. We have seen time and time and time again, over and over again, even a million examples of this, where that's where we find ourselves. Like, go find me a pure Pagona viticeps. I'll wait. Go ahead and go find a pure bearded dragon, one of those common lizards in reptile keeping. Go find me a pure viticeps. I dare you. Go find one. You won't be able to, because somebody decided that breeding Barbata and Viticeps together ad infinitum would make German giants, and that would be cool. And downstream, now 30 years on, they're all mutts. They're all pet trade bearded dragons. Go find me a pure Honduran milk snake. Go find me, it's like go find me a pure leopard gecko. Go find me any of these super common species. You know, and unfortunately, something like a Leachianus gecko is getting close to that point where, you know, I think there's like 800 Leachianus on for sale on Morph Market, and you'd be very difficult to find a pure one in that pile. And if you did, you'd probably still have some, be scratching your head because they're, it's like, I don't know, it's kind of, you know, it's like, it's like, they don't quite look, they all kind of look suspiciously like, why do all of them now have like little pink spots and stuff? Like, I wonder, it's like, yeah, because, you know, you're going to be, even if you find something that's labeled as such, you're going to be scratching your head and questioning it forever because the choices of other people made in the past and continue to make now. And I don't know.
Just to annoy the green tree python, we had a conversation in when you come over to Papua about the design of green tree pythons. Do you think the phenotypes can be more extreme when you do hybridize it, and that's why people to do it?
Ironically, no. That's the craziest thing. It's like, if you look at what are the coolest, most extreme looking chondros, usually they're a wild-caught locality animal. Like when you, like, you can get better results by just sticking within a population or a species and breeding for the traits they already naturally are predisposed to. Like if you look at, like, let's just say an Aru, that's my favorite of the green pythons. You know, there are tons of blue, splatters of white, and that blue mask around their face. Like if you just, like, for like 3 generations, I'm going to focus on blue and white and these things, they're already predisposed to having a lot of blue and white on them. You can run with that pretty quickly. But trying to breed that to a Biak that doesn't have any of that, you're not, like, you know, you have a snake that has like this predisposed to, I mean, let's face it, a lot of it is because they want red babies, because the red babies is kind of a cult like devotion to the red baby thing. I don't quite understand, but you know, Biak, it's like, what is it? It's most notable for having a prolonged color change and retaining patchy yellow blotches. That's the big thing. Not for blue, not for white in much quantity. And so breeding, you see a lot of Aru to Biak hybrids, but it's like, what is the point of that? You're like, they're each cool in their own way, but for such totally different reasons. If you breed them together, you ever seen a Aru Biak mix that had patches of yellow, but also had blue and white on it? No, you've never seen that because they don't exist, because it doesn't work like that. You don't get hybrids. People that produce hybrids almost always fall for the same logical fallacy, and it does not work. They believe that they can, you breed 2 species that are very cool for very different reasons, and they believe that they can somehow arbitrarily just pick and choose the best, what they deem the best traits, i.e. retaining yellow in a Biak chondro and the blue and white in a Aru chondro, and that the hybrid offspring will retain the best traits from both parents. And that never is what you get. What you always get is the average of all traits, not the best traits, which is an arbitrary designation. What our human mammal eyes decide is the most appealing thing. It's not how it works. You get the average of everything. And the average of everything in most time is brown. That's what it is. And in chondros, it's just green. You end up with a lot of unremarkable, when they're 5 years old, a lot of unremarkable green snakes. You don't get these extreme variations in phenotype you see in some of these populations are kind of fragile in a genetic sense. And when you dilute that and water that down, it just goes away. So it's why you don't ever see a Aru Biak with like all the cool blue and white of the Aru with splatters of yellow on it. I've never seen that. And I dare say I probably never will.
Yeah, same with the tree monitors. All the tree monitor crosses that have been done so far, you just end up with a muddy sort of mess. You know, the green and black obviously wasn't, that was the stupidest one to do anyway, because you would have thought that black, what were they expecting? Green with black stripes? I don't know.
That's exactly what they're expecting. They're expecting a black lizard with thin, bright green pattern elements, so a dark black animal with a little bit of green, bright electric green on it. That's exactly what they're expecting. Nope. I mean, it's like, oh, shocker, it didn't work like that. Go figure, right? It's like it never works like that. There's not, give me a single example where it has ever worked like that. It's the average of everything. It's like you don't get the back. I mean, one of my, I guess, better known projects, as I said, not monitor lizards, is hypomelanistic Reptiles pythons. They're a bright reddish orange snake, and the number of people that have tried to buy those animals for me to make hybrids with them is staggering. And usually they want to breed to some diamond jungle jag, which is already a 3-way hybrid anyway, but they're neon yellow and jet black, and it's already a 3-way hybrid. So they want to make it, let's make it a 4-way hybrid. But the goal is always in the mind, you're thinking, I want the neon yellow and jet black, but also this bright red, to get a neon yellow, bright reddish orange and black snake. It never works. You end up with a tan and brown snake.
Yeah.
Because the red animal is just, at the genetic level, is just barely a red animal. And the yellow animal is just barely a yellow animal. Also, the yellow elements and the red elements are the same elements, because yellow and red are not distinct in snakes. They're one, it's a, yellow and red are a continuum of one thing, not two separate, wholly separate things. So you cannot, if you don't really have true red pigment, you just have yellow pigment that kind of looks red, and red and yellow are a spectrum. You can't have red and yellow because they're the same thing. You end up with the mix, what's between these 2 points is what you end up with. So you could never have a red and yellow snake in that, with this, by doing that anyway.
Yeah.
By hybridizing carpets. And so it was just like, it's doomed to fail. And I still, every year, people still, that's what they want. They always want to buy. It's always that person wants that lone female. Oh, I just need a female. You know, it's like, it's not going to work. It's never worked. If it worked, you'd already have seen this 20 years ago. It's never going to happen. So
going back to the locality stuff compared to like potential new species, is there any way of firstly verifying any of those localities? Yeah, I know you've got quite a few in with the carpet pythons, which is quite surprising. Is that just because people did bother to keep them pure from the start?
Very few people did. Some people did. Usually you're trying to find some old ass snakes that are a million years old that just didn't get the memo they were supposed to be dead. And the older they are, the things go, it's, most people I guess are familiar with the concept of entropy. If you're not familiar with the concept of entropy, it is the tendency for things to go from a state of order to a state of disorder over time. It's usually used in like cosmology and stuff to describe the universe. But entropy affects all things, and it affects this kind of thing even in the hobby. You know, animals arrive, and people know a lot about where that process, where this came from, who had what, and everything. And as time goes on, and the generations pass, and the decades pass, entropy gets a hold. And by the time you get over here 30 years later, nobody remembers shit about anything, because most animals don't stay with their original owner their whole lives. Most of the time, most snakes, which are fairly long-lived, might have 2, 3, 4 owners in their life. People sell them, and each time, less and less of that information gets cast on. And then they produce babies if they do, and then those babies people buy those babies, don't even ask questions, and then they don't know. And then the person who produced the first ones dies, and it's like, it just, eventually you end up with nobody knows anything, or very little. So you're oftentimes trying to hunt for old snakes. The rare animal that is still alive and somebody remembers something. With the carpet pythons in mind, I am fortunate in that I have good friends who are geneticists, which is kind of an unusual to have as many geneticist friends. And then I have like 4 friends that are geneticists, which frankly seems like a lot of friends to have who are geneticists, to have 4 of them. So I was able to, when we did the second edition of the carpet python book, I was able to have all that locality stuff genetically sequenced and compared to previously published academic works that showed different populations of carpet pythons, and they all keyed out to be what they were supposed to be. You couldn't use that to pinpoint a locality specifically, but broadly, this is from here-ish. You know, it's like in the broad stroke, the stories matched up with the genetic evidence to the extent that, you know, you couldn't pinpoint it from this. You couldn't look at a jungle carpet's DNA and say, well, that's definitely from Tully Gorge versus that's definitely from Palmerston. It's not that level of, but you could say that's consistent with a jungle from this general area, you know, where those things occur. And that's about as good as you can get, and better than most people can get, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a crossover, and this is where you get a lot of sort of kickback of, there's like micro localities, and then there's localities, and then there's obviously species. So do you think even in the hobby we can keep up with like the micro localities? I know that with the alternate it gets really crazy, but even with some of the chondros and stuff, maybe not thinking of it as such as the micro-locality, but if you can look at it as like a species level and group those ones together, that would be good. And if we,
I think the concept of micro-locality, I mean, if I could get two carpet pythons, those ancestors came out of the same tree, I would totally be game for that. That'd be awesome. Yeah. It doesn't mean they're different, though. It just means I think that's just a curious. I would find that interesting and appealing, but I don't think it means anything. I think the micro-locality thing is a kind of silly, but it's like, I mean, I get it. Like if you could, but you're only ever going to have that in very rare instances, or you literally could just in your own home country, you can go collect them. I don't think that, what matters is if you have like alternative that's from this rock cut here, and then there's another rock cut a mile down the road, that's all contiguous habitat. That's one, they're part of the same breeding population. They're not isolated to just this. That rock cut on the side of the road is just an easy place for you to find them. It's not that they're not in between this rock cut and that rock cut, because they are. This is the easiest point where you will find them. If they're all part of the same breeding population, it's the same thing. I mean, I think it's interesting if you can have them from the same mile marker. That's cool. But it doesn't. Anybody thinks it makes them different is insane. Like, and there are those people that think like, oh, these. It's like it's not. It's like, I caught a couple of rosy boas in Anza Borrego, which is a really good locality for rosy boas. Me and some friends were down there for a conference, and I posted pictures on a rosy boa group, and people were just arguing endlessly that that's not an Anza Borrego rosy boa, and it's like that. It's like, are you fucking crazy? Like, I literally caught both of these big boas within a couple miles of each other on this road at this place with my own self. Like, what do you? No, that has to be somebody's escaped pet. It's like, so you're telling me you think that a wild rosy boa got caught by a herper, collected, then released in the wrong place, then found by another herper? Like, are you out of your freaking mind? Or is it possible, just maybe, the things vary a bit more than you might? It's like, what?
I mean, that's like a pretty rare occurrence, and you're pretty lucky in America to actually be able to do that. I was thinking more, and I'm not keeping to bash on the chondros, but they're just such a perfect example of this, of like where you've got the Raja Ampat Islands, and the same with the scrub pythons you were mentioning. It's like, well, they all, we got coffee owl scrubs and from this exact same islands, Batanta ones, Waigeo ones and stuff. How far would you go in breeding those? Are you happy to breed a barneck as a Raja Ampat one, or you want it known from Batanta? And the same with the chondros. It becomes a bit messy.
I think this also tees into another issue with the hybridization thing and all of this, and that is that people have to have a bit more patience, in my opinion. If I was able to get a Waigeo scrub python, I would not breed it until I obtained another Waigeo scrub python, which might be difficult.
Yeah.
Well, case in point, like I have some Halmahera pythons. I have 2.1, and the female sat here alone for 8 years because could I have bred a barneck scrub python to it? Just be impatient. Well, I can't just not breed it. I got to put something in there. It's like, no, it just sat there until I could obtain the right thing. I'm not gonna. I mean, I could see a scenario whereas eventually you give up and just do something like that. But like because to use the barneck scrub pythons and the Raja Ampat and all that, they're not different species. I've looked at their DNA. They're not different species. They are definitely the same species. I still wouldn't breed one from Batanta to one from Waigeo. I mean, maybe, just maybe, if years and years had gone by and Indonesia decided to no longer allow the export of scrub pythons or something like that, and there was just no realistic hope of getting something, maybe I'd consider that, because having Raja Ampat scrubs more generally is more important than not having, if you're looking at getting nothing. But I would hold out. I have scrub pythons right now that I don't have pairs of, and I'm not going to breed them to something they're not, just to make babies.
There's a lot of patience that is required if you want to do this properly. I think there's a big responsibility of doing it that way, at least waiting out for a while to see what you got, even with the locality stuff. And then we've got an issue with a lot of these monitor species that we're getting out of Indonesia now, which are being collected on new islands where they're potentially not the same thing. There potentially are new species. So maybe how would you go about that if you've got a thought it's a new species? For me, it's just you just don't breed it until you get another one. I'm sure you'll probably agree with me on that.
it's like people, the hobby is full of people who act, in my opinion, irresponsibly with this stuff. It's like, if you don't know what something is, why are you trying to breed it at all? And if you have some new thing from a new place, you don't know what that is. Making the assumption that it is, but most of the time people do what they do because they want to get paid to do what they do. So if you have new monitor lizard from new island and you don't know, is it a new species, is it a morph, is it a freaking just another island population of the same thing we already have, then one of those things, people will generally settle on and they don't have, and there's, let's just say you have three possibilities. It's a morph, it's a new locale, it's a new species, it's just the same old from a different place. People will generally gravitate towards the option of the three that is the most financially beneficial for them. Shockingly, I know, shocker. They will gravitate towards the thing that they want it to be. Well, it would be better for me if it was this. They convince themselves of what it is. That is better for them. And that is oftentimes not the thing to do. Again, it's like when you assume, you open the door to fuck things all up. And look at now, like, well, let me get back to like the Leachianus geckos. Well, all these just different localities of leechies, so we can just mix them all up and they're still all Leachianus. Like, they're fucking not. Like, if one lizard, if a leechie on one island is twice the size of a leechie on another island, and its skull shape is different, its color, its pattern, its body size and shape, and its skull is literally shaped differently, it's a different gecko. Did you need a taxonomist to write you a paper to tell you that? Fuck no. You're mixing them together because they're different, not because they're the same, but because they're obviously not the same. You don't need somebody. It's like people made emerald tree boa hybrids before the paper came out that split basins as Peteziae. Like, did you need a taxonomist to tell you that? Did you need a taxonomist to tell you that a northern white lip and a southern white lip weren't the same snake? Because I bet you kind of knew that already. It's like, but that's always, well, they're all the same species. So there's a guy who bred and made Moluccan python, barneck hybrids years and years and years and years ago with a female Moluccan. This was when you could get Moluccan pythons for $100. But yeah. Nobody could breed them, but he did, and he hatched like 3 hybrid babies, and he just thought, well, he's giving me this bullshit. This is in like, I want to say like 98, 99. I actually got the proven female from him in the late 90s, and he's like, oh, well, they're all the same species. It doesn't matter. It's like, no, they're not the same species. Do you really think they're the same? Really? You think it's the same species just because there's 15,000 islands in Indonesia and there's pythons and monitors and stuff on all these islands, most of these islands? There's so many undescribed species. You don't need an academic to tell you something. Your eyes are telling you all you need to know. These are very different things. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Well, I don't have a male. That's the reason. I just didn't have a male Moluccan python, so got to make babies. It's like, actually, you don't. You don't have to do that. You can just have a snake and not breed it. It's really easy. At any moment, I have a decent handful of snakes that have been sitting there solo for years because I don't have a mate for them. I haven't found the right bloodline. I haven't found the right animal, the right species, the right population, what have you. I'm not just going to start, I've got one Biak scrub python. I've had it for a while now. I'm not going to just breed it to a southern because I have a southern female. I just have this one Biak. I will wait as long as it takes. It might take a decade to find the right animal, and that's just what you do.
So but going on to the taxonomy side, just to touch on it a little bit, we might bring this up a bit more later, but a lot of the stuff in taxonomy has actually come from the pet trade. When you start looking at it, especially the monitors, I mean, probably 90% of the monitors, especially from Indonesia, that's all been pet trade animals, and a lot of those were known well before the taxonomists know about it. So again, we've got some sort of responsibility to keep things pure before they're described, just because of how long it takes to catch up sometimes.
Well, again, you don't know. It's like just assuming stuff is like, you get into trouble very quickly. If you take a conservative approach, everything's a new species until it proves not to, until you know for sure it isn't. Well, you're not being conservative in that regard will never cause any problems at all. Jumping the gun for greed or out of ignorance or just out of impatience, that causes problems and can and will cause problems. Being conservative and patient has never caused a problem. Making a shitload of hybrid freaking lizards or snakes or whatever, and then now nobody can find the real thing anymore because you jumped the gun or you were impatient or you were, or you're greedy, whichever, pick your poison. That does and has caused a lot of problems. There's a bunch of species that are wildly popular in our hobby that their gene pool is absolutely, utterly, and completely compromised and never can be fixed. It's like, find me a morph boa constrictor that's pure anything. Good luck.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, they're all 3-4-way hybrids now. But because morphs, we have to do this because morphs. It's like, I wouldn't want to be, so what if somebody just wanted a pure Colombian boa? Like good luck. Good luck with that. You couldn't even find one, I don't think.
Well, I heard you on another.
If it wasn't for occasional imports, you'd be pretty hard pressed to find a pure chondro of any of the species. It's like, even when you see captive bred ones, half the time they're not pure. Even if they find the quote unquote pure captive bred ones, because Pulcher and Uterensis can outwardly look fairly similar unless you know what you're looking at. Like, there's a lot of those that are misidentified historically. Everything with a blue stripe is strong, basically. So you get those two. So even there, you gotta really, you can't just assume that because someone's selling some pure whatever that they're actually accurate.
So how do you tackle that, Nick, with the stuff you do? And that's what most people will just give up. And is there a way? Is there like some research you do, or they're asking the right questions or something to try and get to the bottom of this? Because this is the biggest.
There's a bunch of things I do, but I mean, honestly, like, I've been doing this in my area of expertise, if you will, I guess, with pythons. Like, I've been doing this for so long, I know what to look for. So, like, a lot of this stuff, like, to a trained eye, you can pick things out. You see the red flags. You kind of know what you're looking for, and you kind of, and then it's just chasing down. Where'd you get it from? And then you call that guy. Where'd he get it from? Or where'd the parents come from? And digging up pictures of long dead snakes and this sort of stuff. It has become easier to do that in the era of digital photography because now everybody has a million pictures they've taken of everything somewhere. It might be hard to find them, but back in the days when you had to take take pictures on film, there's far fewer pictures. So a lot of animals would come and go, and there might never be a picture. Now there's a lot more images and stuff, and trying to verify a lot of things when you drill down. A lot of these localities, a lot of these species, however subtle people think they are, it's not really as subtle as they think. There are key characteristics you can kind of pick out that tell you what you're looking at. It can be tough, and for somebody who doesn't have decades of experience with it, it could be daunting and difficult. Definitely. Also, I tend to default, if it's something I'm really concerned about, I will tend to default to wild caught animals, just because, well, they're not hybrids, they're literally wild caught. You can eliminate that possibility. If you get a wild caught animal and it's a population that has some distinctive characteristics, and it matches, it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, and it's wild caught, it's because it's a freaking duck. It's like there's not, you don't have these problems that somebody bred the Pulcher to the Uterensis and thought they were both from Saran. You don't have that possibility with a lot of this stuff. So, which is a sad sort of, to me, that's a kind of an indictment of the hobby, that you're better off getting wild caught animals in some cases because people in the hobby are just so willy-nilly about what they're doing with it.
So I know you're really good with your lineage. So for anyone wanting to get into this sort of side of the hobby, because it is definitely a different subset to what we're talking about tonight of keeping this locality stuff pure. Is there a way that makes it easier for future keepers to sort of know that it is a pure locality?
Yes, but ultimately, I mean, and because there'll be some, I don't know, like when you get to the ripe old age of a million like me, you've attracted by this point, and because I'm pretty outspoken on issues like this, I have attracted a fair there's a noisy minority of haters. I think that's fair to say. I mean, who just, you know, hate on you because you question what they're doing and why, I suppose. But I'll have a few more of them after this podcast. But that's my lot in life, I guess. Ultimately, with anything, is you are ultimately everything. And someone will point this out. Some pro-hybrid person will always point this out. And then, so I'm going to state what that is, and then I'm going to dismantle it. They will point out, and accurately so, that ultimately it comes down to taking somebody's word for it, doesn't it? It does.
Yeah.
Whether that's an importer, whether that's a breeder, whether it's me. If someone buys a steak from me, they're taking, do they know that I didn't just make that lineage chart up and just fabricate all that information? No, you're taking my word for it that I'm telling you the truth. And so on and so forth down the line. And it's like, well, is that a flawless system? No, obviously not. People can forget, they can be mistaken, and they can even lie for various reasons. So taking someone's word for it is not a perfect, flawless system. It is the best system we have. So pointing out that that is a flawed system, so you can't trust anything, so you might as well just hybridize all your reptiles, is ridiculous. Because that system of taking somebody's word for it is also the entire basis for all of human civilization and all of human knowledge. I mean, how do we know that atoms exist? Because someone told you and you took their word for it. How do we know that plate tectonics is real? Because you learned it in school, which was your teacher telling you that, and you didn't. It's like, well, does every generation have to reinvent the wheel and have to figure out how to make fire on its own? No, because you took somebody's word for it. To say attack the entire method of all of acquired human knowledge and say, well, that's not reliable. It's like, you know, how do you know who your parents are? Do you question who your parents are? No. Well, how do you know that it's your parents? Because they fucking told you they're your parents. It's like, do you do you question that? Like, it's like, it's kind of a ridiculous. No, it's not perfect. People make mistakes, and some people can be dishonest, but it's the only game in town. There is no other system for passing knowledge along. Lest everybody have to start figuring out how to flint knap stone tools and invent the wheel from fire every generation. You kind of you're stuck with this system of acquiring knowledge from the people who came before you and taking their word for it. Sometimes, I guess on rare occasions, that may lead you astray. That is true, but it is not, you know, throughout the whole system. It's the only game in town.
Yeah, I guess the devil's advocate side of it is when people have sort of lied. Can you think of any examples of localities or new species that have proven not to be true or anything like that, or anything very dubious?
I'm sure if I sat there and thought about it long enough, I could think of similar examples that, I mean, one I just will always find, I mean, somebody getting ripped off, I shouldn't laugh at, but I kind of do laugh at this particular one. This was the European individual who was very pro-hybrid carpet python. And this was in my younger days where I was far more likely. Now, when people want to debate hybridization and whatnot on the internet, so I generally just don't even bother to engage. It's usually like people always tag me, and I'm like, my days of arguing with nitwits on the internet are mostly behind me, I think. There's just because you're not going to convince somebody of anything. They're not going to listen. They're going to do what they're going to do anyway, and they're not going to. I have better things to do than argue with people on the internet. It's just the most unproductive thing you can possibly do. But this was back, 20 years ago when I was, a younger man and much more likely to argue. In fact, it was a part-time occupation, was arguing on the internet, I think. So we'd argue about why, hybridizing these carpet pythons and all this, and why that was bad and why that was great, and all the usual greatest hits arguments on that side of you don't really know where anything came from, and eventually you don't know where anything came from, and then you keep counterpoint. Eventually, the pro-hybrid people always, with the carpet pythons, always get to the same. The argument was over when they would get to the following line, where it would always somehow involve like the Monty Python explanation of a bird could have picked up a carpet python here and flown and then dropped it over here. So they might all just be hybrids. Like if you get to the point in the hybrid argument where a bird is dropping a snake somewhere, it's not supposed to be. The argument is over. It's like it always gets to the Monty Python dropping in the African sparrow thing. It would always get to that, and then, but anyway, this guy would argue with this, all this stuff, and then he got some new carpet python morph, and it was this crazy-looking, partly banded, half-assed, patternless, really, really bizarre thing. And he was going to make $1 million from this new morph, and he paid a ton of money for it. Turns out somebody bred a tannenbar python to a jungle carpet. and made Tannenbar python jungle carpet hybrids, and then sold them as a new morph of carpet python in the sky. So yeah, in that case, I guess taking somebody's word for it was not. And the guy who got ripped off was a shady character. No need to really get into all that, but it was couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I'll tell you that. You know, it's
karma.
Yeah. You actually, I keep forgetting you're Northern European stock yourself, so you probably know this individual. But
yeah, I'd imagine so.
We won't. I'm sure you probably do. We won't name names.
Yeah. No. So, just to come off the locality side of thing, we've said our opinions and stuff of it. If anyone's interested in starting a locality project, how would they go about that? What's the best way of setting something up? If there are some, with carpet pythons, it seems pretty good and pretty easy. You got a fair few different localities. The jungle side of things, you got the Tullies and the Parmersons and stuff. But if someone really wants to do that, or they've been given some information on a project, maybe it's pretty new, how would you go about doing that and doing it responsibly?
You want to get as much genetic diversity as you can within that population or locality. If it's something that is imported, you want to get as big a group as you can, have as broad a genetic base as is possible. That is usually usually with stuff like that, your options are pretty limited, but get what you can. Even people will do dumb things in the hobby. Like they'll get like an exporter or an importer might have 3 of a thing, and it's 2 males and a female, so they'll buy a pair. Well, I don't need the extra male. It's like, you might never see this again. Get all of them. Yeah, if it's an extra male, yeah, you can breed that male, one male, and then a different male the other year, another year. Get whatever you can possibly get. You cannot assume that, especially if it's imported stuff, or even if it's captive bred, you can't just assume that people like, well, I'll just get one next year. It's like, there ain't going to be none next year. Like, how many times, like, I can't even count how many times, like, people like, oh, they want something. It's like, oh, I'll just get one from next year, when you're clutch next year. It's like, there may not be a clutch next year. It's like, you don't know. Things that are alive always end up, again, entropy. Things that are alive tend to get unalive at some point, don't they? Animals don't live forever. They don't reproduce forever. A reality that most people in python keeping, anyway, don't really realize or don't want to confront is that, with a few exceptions, there are a couple notable exceptions, but generally speaking, with most pythons, if a female lays 3 or 4 clutches of eggs in its entire lifetime, that is about all you can ever expect. Some don't even get that far. But if you get 3 or 4 clutches, that's probably all you're ever going to see in its entire lifetime. It might live a long time. Pythons I have that like laid 3 clutches, 1, 2, 3. Then I have an inland, the founder female Maug inland, the one that almost all the Maug inlands in the United States are descended from my original pair. She laid 3 clutches, 1, 2, 3. Hasn't laid a clutch in 10 years. She's fine. She's healthy. She isn't going to ever breed again. 3 clutches in a row. Boom, boom, boom. Got that lineage all established. Hasn't done a damn thing in a decade. I have a Wamena scrub python. 1, 2, 3. 3 perfect clutches. Boom, boom, boom. Hasn't laid in 3 years. Now her 3 years passed. It's like, I'm like, she's not that old, really, but it's not like she couldn't. But you can't assume that things are just going to keep breeding into perpetuity, because they generally don't. Some smaller things like Antaresia and ball pythons tend to be way more prolific. I've had Stimson's pythons lay 12 years in a row. And then after the 12th year, I just retired the female. And she probably would have kept going. I know of a children's python that laid, I think, 20 clutches. And ball pythons putting up similar numbers, 18, 20 clutches in 20 years, this kind of like year in, year out. But those are the exceptions. You don't see, many other pythons. You don't see white-lip pythons laying 12 clutches. You don't see that. Like, I've got a black-headed python who's 15, and she laid her 7th clutch this year. And I'm like, sweet. Like, I'm like pretty stoked, 7 clutches. We're on, we're in bonus rounds now. So you can't assume that kind of thing. So get whatever you can when you can. I have personally not purchased animals because there was just like, I'll never forget myself. I had an opportunity to pick up like it was an importer in the U.S. They had 2, they were both males though. They had 2 lone male patterned gold Tannenbar pythons, and they were like $200. and they did have a female, so I passed on. I'll just wait till I get a female. Like, I was like, now, are you kidding me? It's like, no,
Yeah.
If it's something rare or something like that, you get what you can, and you just sit on it and wait. You don't pass things up. You get what you can when you can. So if you're starting a project like that, get all the genetic diversity you can when you can, and always keep an eye out for more. Especially if you're dealing with wild caught animals. The reality is, like, if you bought, 5 wild caught reptiles, you're probably not going to end up with 5 that live to breed, are you? You're probably going to lose one on the way or so. Some things don't. The reality of that is they don't all adjust. They don't all, if somebody, I suppose if an importer brought in a group of 25 of the thing and you were able to pick and choose the youngest animals, maybe you get like a smaller group and don't get all of them. But usually with new stuff like that, you get what you can, and it's going to be all shapes and sizes and all sorts of conditions, and some will do better and some will not. So get whatever you can.
That's a good point, Nick. On the younger animal side, because we see a lot with some of the monitors and stuff, they tend to be, this is talking more about the captive bred stuff, but you were saying, especially with the pythons and stuff, the younger the better.
Oh, absolutely. They're less beat up. They're less riddled with parasites. They seem to be stressed less by the importation process. Old animals are like old people. They tend to get set in their ways, don't they? Like if you got a hatchling or a young Halmahera python, let's say, and it was still eating like small rodentish mammals and lizards and whatnot, and it's gonna adapt a whole lot better. If you get a 9-foot giant adult that's lived for 20 years in a tree eating Nicobar pigeons and flying foxes mostly, you got any Nicobar pigeon feeders and flying fox you're going to feed this thing? That's what it's used to eating. And it's old and it's tired and it's worn out. It's going to stress out a lot more and it's not going to do well. And I've had giant Halmahera pythons that came in back in the early days that didn't do well. The ones that did the best always.
Yeah.
How small they are directly correlates to how well they do. I mean, sometimes you don't have any choice. You get what you can, and that might be a bigger animal. You just got to roll with what you got. Also, if something is of reproductive size, you don't know how old it is. You can't cut it apart and count the rings like a tree. If you got a juvenile, let's say, okay, I mean, you were said before we're on that, you get good reproduction out of a monitor from between 3 and 10 years. They might live 20, but reproductive fecundity drops off after about 10. If you get an adult, if you get you can't tell the difference between like a 4-year-old and a 14-year-old. They're all adult size. Like if you got a juvenile, it's not reproduced. And whatever its reproductive years are, you get all of those years to reproduce. If you get something that's a wild-caught adult, a large adult, it might already be past that point of not even being an option. It might be out of that window of optimal fertility anyway. And then you add the stress on top of that of importing an older animal, and you end up with an animal, even if it lives, never breeds. Yeah, you always want to get the youngest. Always want to get the youngest possible. And I got to tell you, this should not ruffle anybody's feathers nor come as any surprise, but there's always people looking for reasons to be offended, I guess. This extends to captive bred animals too. Like if somebody hatches a snake and they raise it under their conditions and their stable conditions, and they're doing what they're doing, the heat is provided how they're doing it, they're feeding what they're feeding it, and this is all the snake has ever known. And then that snake is now 11 years old, and then you sell that snake to somebody else who's going to set it up completely different. The thermal profile of what they're doing is completely different. Their feeding schedule, everything such as is completely different. And then they wonder why that snake doesn't do as well. It is not a shortcut to buy in most cases. It is never, with ball pythons and Antaresia being the exception, snakes that just want to breed all the time. With those few exceptions, buying like even captive bred older adults is not really a great idea. People think, oh, it's a shortcut. I'll just skip to the front of the line. I'll just start breeding stuff right away. I'll just buy these adults. Like, you're probably not. It's like, even if those adults ever breed for you, it's probably going to take them a couple of years to get used to what you're doing, by which time you could just got some babies and raise them. So it's not really, there aren't any shortcuts most of the time. It's like,
it's more patience, and the locality stuff is even more, as we keep saying, there's even more patience. It's like another level of patience because you got that of getting the right animals again. The other devil's advocate which I get a lot, would be inbreeding. So say you only, we just said there, you need to get as many as you want.
Oh, man, this could get the haters out. Forgetting all the haters are going to come out now. They're going to come out for me.
I'm trying to tick them all off, Nick. I've got a list.
They're rummaging around looking for their pitchforks and lighting their torches now. They're getting ready for it. All right. Inbreeding. Is it a real phenomenon? Yeah. Is it the end of the world? No. And here's a reality check, some science, and a bit of philosophy, I guess. A large portion of humans' objections to inbreeding reptiles is sociological and societal, in that we think inbreeding is yucky as it pertains to people, so we project that onto animals. We think that's gross. Snakes do not think that's gross. Have you ever noticed that virtually every snake that you've ever heard of comes in an albino? And almost every one of those albinos stems from a wild albino? Why would wild albinos pop up in almost everything? Oh, the answer is snakes don't care about inbreeding, and they're constantly messing with their siblings. It's like the only way that happens is because of inbreeding with a recessive allele in the wild, in a small population. Snakes have small home ranges. I'm not sure. I can't speak to monitors. I assume they do not also have very large home ranges. So no. If a python, I'll just say a carpet python because it's the easiest thing for me to talk about, but it doesn't really matter. Let's say a carpet python crawls in a tree hollow and it lays 12 eggs. Those 12 babies are going to filter out into that local ecosystem. They're not going hundreds of miles away, and they're not seeking out unrelated mates. They're going to hang around the same general vicinity, and if the few that make it to be adulthood, the most likely mate they're going to come across is probably one of their siblings from that year or previous year or whatever, or a half sibling, because they're not wandering that far. And that is why albinos pop up in reptiles way more than mammals. Mammals will actively avoid mating with close relatives. Mammals will practice behavioral avoidance of mating with their close relatives. A lot of mammals will, anyway. And so to find an albino kangaroo in the wild or an albino deer is a lot rarer, isn't it? You almost never, they pop out. You see it once in a while, but not like you do in snakes. You see it all the time in snakes because they don't care about these things and they have home ranges. So they routinely inbreed in the wild all the time. So they're not that put off by it. So us projecting our cultural sort of mindset onto snakes is kind of ridiculous. All that inbreeding actually does is it increases the rate of homozygosity. It increases the probability that because there's multiple different alleles for every gene. There's multiple different versions of every gene in the body. And by outbreeding and breeding to less, there's no such thing as non-inbreeding. All breeding is inbreeding because all of life is related. You are related to the lizard. The lizard is related to the grass. Like all of life is related. So there's, strictly speaking, all breeding is inbreeding. There is no such thing as outbreeding. It's just how much are you outbreeding or how much are you inbreeding? It's a matter of degree. It's not a matter of, there is no such thing as two unrelated carpet pythons or two unrelated mangrove monitors or two unrelated anything. They are all shockingly closely related. If you were to take any two, any two, I said mangrove monitors. You took any two mangrove monitors, they're going to be 99% genetically identical to each other. They are. That 1% that's it. So you're already, it's just a matter of degree. What inbreeding does, by increasing the rate of homozygosity, it increases the likelihood of all the possible alleles for a given gene. It increases the probability that they're going to get the same version from both parents. And they'll be homozygous at that locus, which can be good, bad, or neutral. Some versions of genes do a lot of different jobs, and there are all these different alleles don't all work the same. A lot of them might work adequately. Some might work poorly. Some might work better than normal, and some might not work at all. And if you're inbreeding and you get, the same copy that works adequately, no problem. If you get two copies of the version that works better than normal, well, hell yeah, then you're really doing well. But if you get two copies of the ones that work less well or don't work at all, that's where it causes problems. So while you can have a buildup of genes that make you faster, or give you some selective advantage, you're probably more likely to get a buildup of ones that are detrimental, that don't work as well. Since you inherit one copy of each gene from each parent, if you have a normally functioning copy that does its job, its gene product, it produces gene product well, and you have a bum copy that doesn't produce its gene, doesn't do its job very well, oftentimes the fully functioning normal copy can pick up the slack for the not that good a copy, and your animal is functional and does okay. It's when you get two copies that don't work. It's like if you had like if like 50% was the baseline for functionality in a gene, but there's like 5 alleles, and it's like 3 of them are like 50%, one's at like 60%, it's 10% overproducing, and one is like at 25, it's only doing half of its job. It's like, well, if you mostly are hanging around the middle, great. If you get one of the better copies, great, you're better than 50%. It's if you get one of the good copies and one of the ones that only works at 25% of capacity, it's like, well, you might be functional. But if you get 2 of the ones that only, then you're deficient in some area. And stacking and the buildup of those over time to inbreeding is what causes inbreeding depression. But there's just layers of complexity to this. Animals can and do go through a bit of a genetic purge in a small population. If, let's say, you see this in islands all the time. If inbreeding was automatically a death sentence, there would be no small island populations of anything, would there? But last I checked, there's a shitload of small island populations of reptiles seemingly doing just fine. So they get to these islands and they're all super close. There's no genetic diversity on a small island. They're all super closely related because they're all descended from a small handful of animals that made it to that island. Maybe only one animal made it to that island. If one gravid female makes it to an island on a raft of, a snake in a tree or a lizard in a tree, and it's near in a mangrove swamp, and a cyclone comes through, blows that tree apart, breaks that branch off, and they don't need a raft of vegetation. They see the one branch they were already sitting on, and that branch makes it to the next island out. Those eggs get laid or babies are born, and then now you have a population of 14. But they're all siblings, and that's the genesis of this entire island population. What will happen given enough time is there'll be a bit of a genetic purge. If there was something in the genome of that original founder female and her offspring that was super deleterious, that population might fail to get established, and within a few generations it flames out because there was too many bad things in there that you don't want to be homozygous for. If there isn't a bunch of bad stuff in there, you can have a population established from a tiny number of animals, and they can do just fine. There was some research done, I think, in 2024 on the population of woolly mammoths on Wrangel Island in Siberia. I realize this is a reptile podcast, and most people aren't up on mammoth taxonomy and mammoth science, but I'm kind of a paleo nerd. So most people would be shocked to realize that while most people in the hobby have a greater level of awareness for animals and extinction than the population at large, and most people would know that mammoths have been extinct for about 12,000 years, kind of at the terminal Pleistocene-Holocene transition, when humans killed them all, mostly. That there was a population isolated on an island. There's 2 populations, one on the Channel Islands off of Southern California and Wrangel Island off Siberia, where 3,000 years ago, there were still woolly mammoths, Columbian mammoths pygmy Columbian mammoths on the Channel Islands. And then in Wrangel Island, you had woolly mammoths 3,000 years ago. So the pyramids had been standing for 500 years, and there's still woolly mammoths because there were no people on those islands at the time. Because nobody really even lives there now, they're just mammoth bones laying all over this island. The tusks, bones, just laying there. It's also a really good place for DNA preservation because it's cold, and that sort of cryopreserves the DNA. So there I've got DNA sequences from hundreds of mammoths throughout the entire time that population existed. And population geneticists were able to figure out, using molecular clocks and whatnot, when that population of mammoths got stranded on that island and cut off from the mainland. There used to basically be a spur of ice that kind of connected it to the mainland at times, and that went away, and they got stuck there. So they're able to figure out when that happened, and when they went extinct, and what their genetic health was that whole time. And for most of that time, they were there for thousands of years. Thousands of years, you had a population of mammoths on this island. The island supported a population of about 300 mammoths. About 300 mammoths is all it's not that big of an island. 300 mammoths. And they know that the founding population of mammoths that got stranded was not more than 8 breeding individuals. 8. There could have been like 12 if they were older animals younger animals that died without reproducing, or older animals that never reproduced. But 8 breeding individuals founded a population of 300 that persisted for thousands of years. And looking at their genetic health, they got super, super, super inbred around the midpoint of that run, and then they're genetically started to recover. Their genomes of the last ones were in better shape than the genomes of the ones in the middle. It started to recover somewhat. So this idea that inbreeding is always the end of the world is ridiculous. It is not ideal. If you can avoid inbreeding, do that. If you can, so get whatever genetic diversity you can get. But with a lot of the species we work up in hobby, that might be extremely limited. With anything, obviously, that's Australian, or some of these places that don't allow export anymore, you're not going to get a new bloodline. You've got what you've got, and you should manage it as best you can. So if it is impossible to get new blood, why are you even worried about it? What is the point of like I have Brisbane coastal carpets, the only true southern coastals in the hobby. There's absolutely fuck all no genetic diversity whatsoever, none, and there never will be. There's just what there is, and it is virtually nothing. Everything is super closely related. Everything is sibling pairings, and so why should I worry about that?
But you wouldn't go back.
What are you going to do? It's like, well, all right, you just ride it till the wheels fall off and enjoy it while you have it. If at some point the Brisbanes become so inbred that they become inviable and they won't reproduce anymore and they die out, at least you got to enjoy having them for however many decades they were around. Would you just not breed them and let them die out? Well, I can't get an unrelated one, so I'll just let them die out. What are we, the AZA? I mean, it's like I can't get an unrelated one, so I'm just gonna let them die. It's like there's no, you can't. There's no point in worrying about something for which there is no solution to that problem, and there never will be. You just enjoy it for as long as it lasts, and at least you got to enjoy it for a time. But it's not. There's no.
I guess the argument against that, and what the things we would do, is why don't you just cross it to another coastal carpet python?
Because then it wouldn't be, well, because Brisbane coastal carpets are a different species than the other coastal carpets. Northern coastals and southern southern coastals are different at the species level.
Yeah.
A southern coastal is just as different from a diamond python as a diamond python is from a Brettles python, as a Brettles python is from a coastal carpet python. They're all equally diverged from each other. So they're very different than their northern relatives. So it's like they're just then you just have hybrids. So what's the point? You don't have Brisbane coastals anymore. You have hybrid carpet pythons that have some Brisbane characteristics. It's like,
that's the point I was going to touch on. Is as soon as with these locality stuff and especially with these new species, as soon as you've crossed that out, then it's not what it is. No matter how many times you breed it back to what you got, it's never going to be that you've lost it.
Yeah, it's gone. It's just gone.
Yeah,
it's gone.
So I think we've done the locality side death now. How do we know if an animal is undescribed?
You don't. Well, I mean, you could. There are not so many species of lizards and snakes. You can figure out if something has been described before. But that sometimes will be misleading, because what will happen is you will find, like, okay, let's look at a wide-ranging group like mangrove monitors. Mangrove monitors were one species not that long ago. When I got in the hobby, there was just mangrove monitors. And if you looked at academic works, books, any printed anything that talking about mangrove monitors, it showed one species, Indicus, with a range that went all the way from the Solomons through to everywhere. This giant range, and everything is a mangrove monitor. We know that to not be true, because mangrove monitors are a species complex, and there's a bazillion mangrove monitor species. And so it gets skipped away. So if you did like a literature search, you would find bad information, because, again, just like people in the hobby make this huge mistake in assuming that things are the same based on not good evidence, academics also do that same thing. They describe a species and they delineate, and typically they'll delineate the range, and they will include anything that they think looks like the thing they just described, whether it is or not. And so you end up which is why these species, like, well, you had, when I got to the hobby in the mid-90s, you had water monitors one water monitor species with this massive distribution. You had mangrove monitors with this massive distribution. You had, you know, sand monitor singular with this huge distribution. It's like, and what's happened is you had, I mean, it's like you just keep, there was, well, I guess you had two tree monitors. You still had, you had Bacari and you had Prasinus. But, you know, this would have, the maps were insufficient. And they made the assumption that, well, you had, you know, green tree python with this huge distribution. It's like these old references, they are making assumptions just like even Mojave made assumptions, and those assumptions are very often wrong. So we best not to assume, and be more conservative in that approach, I suppose.
How important is it to keep it clean, or as we'd call it, clean, in the hobby, do you think? The other argument is we're just keeping lizards in boxes. Why does it matter?
It's not about, people are so sort of insular in their mindset and selfish, ultimately. It's not, they think only, well, I shouldn't say all people, but too many people think like this. It's all about what they want to do with it. And they always go, you can't tell me what to do with, I can do whatever I want with my animals, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yes, that is absolutely true. You can, but what you want to do might in fact be stupid. It might. And it is definitely oftentimes a selfish pursuit. You want to pursue a thing that then denies other people later who come after you from being able to pursue the thing they want. So you want to make hybrid retics. Okay, great. Make all the hybrid retics you want. 10 years from now, there's going to be somebody getting a hobby that is really passionate about different species of retics. But fuck that guy, because he doesn't get any species of retics because you took that choice away from him because you did what you wanted to do. You're doing what you want to do denies other people the ability to do what they want to do. The people that keep things not just locality specific, but hell, even just species specific and don't make hybrids, they don't do any damage to anything. Is the purest person who keeps things as locality specific and species specific as it's possible for them to do, given what they know at that time, does not cause problems for anybody later. They don't fuck up the hybrid guy's ability to make hybrids later. The hybrid guy does fuck up the ability of the purist guy to make pure things later, though. So one undoes the other at a fundamental level, and the other just simply does not. These are not equal things. And it's always, and all the rest of this is usually just the rationale people generate to not accept any responsibility for the mess that they themselves have made and continue to make. Rather than just like, think about it for a minute. It's like, I never thought about it. Maybe this isn't a great idea. Maybe I should reevaluate what I'm doing. Nope. Just search for the justification that what you were doing the whole time was totally fine and would never cause any problems. And then you say, you know, busting out the greatest hits of nonsensical arguments like, as long as you honestly represent them, they won't cause a problem. Right? Because that's true, right? Never. That's never been true once. Like, well, I've been in the hobby for so long. I am now on my third generation of dinglings telling me that same nonsense. That as long as you honestly represent the hybrids, they won't cause a problem argument. I've seen like third generation of people telling me the same thing. You know what? It wasn't true in 1993 either when I was getting the hobby in the early 90s. It was bullshit then. It was bullshit in the early 2000s. And guess what? It's bullshit now. It sooner or later, it always causes problems.
Yeah, that's a big thing that happens all the time with loads of monitors. I can think of tree monitors. You know, I've got my theory that there's those three different species, I think, but maybe subspecies, whatever way you want to look at it. It follows that map with your Meraukis, your Jayapuras, and your Vogelkop animals. But they're all Prasinus at the moment. But as long as you say, you know, that first generation, well, they are crosses, they're just a then why does it matter? But you know that I think there is some truth in that first.
When they eventually get split into three things, one of those things will be harder to get and more expensive and thus more desirable. And the babies that are hybrids that look like the rare thing will become the rare thing that's more expensive. This has happened over and over and over and over and over again. It's always happens. And there's another way this direct misrepresentation is a huge problem. Even intentional misrepresentation for just pure greed is a problem historically with this sort of thing. But also there's another sort of way this is insidious in that it genetically sort of swamps the population. And there's a really good example in humanity, in us even having this conversation. We are a product of this same process. It's like, where are all the Neanderthals? Oh, we mostly absorbed them. You had two completely different species of humans. They hybridized, and the one that was more numerous took over, and the one that was less numerous got fully absorbed into the other one. So now there are no Neanderthals, but there are also no pure Homo sapiens. All of humanity are hybrids. There isn't a pure Homo sapien on the earth. We're all hybrids. We all have some percentage of other previous and other side branches of humanity absorbed into us. We overwhelmed them, and then we produce more rapidly. And this happens in captivity as well, with snakes, with lizards, presumably with all of this stuff. If there is only a finite number of cages, there's only a certain number of people who are going to keep whatever species. There's only a certain amount of cage space. So there's like a carrying capacity. Just like the land would only support a certain number of people or a certain number of animals, the hobby will only support a certain population size of a given thing, because there's not an unlimited number of people with an unlimited number of cages. So the greater the percentage of that carrying capacity that is devoted to hybrids, if you get to a point where it's like 95% hybrid retics to 5% non-hybrid retics, which is probably about where we're at, maybe even worse than that, then it's already doomed, because eventually your population doesn't grow, your number of keepers doesn't exponentially grow, the amount of resources and cage space, it just keeps more and more and more. And if you look at the trend line over time, where all retics were pure, now 97% of them are hybrids, and you look at this over time, where does that trend line go? It goes to eventually where all retics are hybrids and no retics are pure. That we're already on that path. Like, it's like we're 95% of the way down that path. It's like eventually it'll become like pure retics will become like Neanderthals. So there's a little bit of all those other species of retics in your mixed up morph retic hybrids, but they don't exist as a distinct entity anymore, which would be a sad indictment of the hobby. Even still, like the dwarf Burmese pythons, which aren't Burmese pythons. They're not from Burma. They're not from the mainland. They're an Indonesian population of Burmese pythons. Ergo, they're not a Burmese python. They are a different species of snake that looks superficially like a Burmese python. They are a different snake. They are rare as rocking horse shit. Why? Because most of the ones that came into the country got hybridized with full-size birds because of course they did. Even though they were obviously a different snake, but we want to make smaller berms. So now you're going to have a situation where all of your berms are going to be hybrids, and the little berms are going to cease to exist. They've been a little bit of a renaissance the last couple of years. Even a good friend of mine has produced a few clutches of them, of pure ones. But even him, he'll tell you that the first thing it sells out are the males, because people keep wanting to buy. They never fucking learn their lesson the first time. They keep buying the male little dwarf berms to breed to their morph berm projects. To just keep making. People just keep repeatedly making the same mistakes over and over again, and they never learn, until eventually there just won't be any of those little berms anymore. They just won't exist, and all of your big berms will be, you just have hybrid berms. That's all you're going to have. And it's like, it's not too late to stop that, but there's no reason to think they're going to pump the brakes and be logical about it. This distinct tiny, why are those little tiny berms so little? Because they live on an island with retics on it. And so biological niche partitioning takes over. Oh, the big giant python job was already filled. So the berm can't be the big giant python. They become a small python, and a small python can coexist in the same habitat even with a big python without competing for resources. There are very, 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 very few examples where you have two large pythons or large monitors. You don't really get two giant things. Where's the place where there's two giant big cats? You don't see lions and tigers in the same place. They exclude each other. They do the same job. You do get Burmese pythons and retics in Thailand. You do get that. But even in those cases, the most likely explanation is they haven't always both been there. You probably have one that's been there a long ass time and one that's a recent arrival. If you fast forward 300,000 years, one's probably going to go away, or one's going to get smaller, or they're going to shift, and that shift can be in size, and that correlates to resources and prey. There is more food at lower trophic levels. So if you're a small snake, the amount of food for small snakes is vastly higher than the amount of food for large snakes. If you need a big retic, needs to eat big stuff. Well, there ain't that much big stuff. So you can't have that many big snakes. You can't have many species of big snakes. But small stuff, there's a lot more prey. You can have you can have multiple small species together, but not big. So usually you'll see, well, among the pythons, if you look at like Australia, you'll see you have scrub pythons all the way up the Cape York Peninsula, mostly. There's a break point there somewhere, but that's a whole nother, don't want to get off on that tangent. But in the south, that rainforest will support 2 pythons. And you get a rainforest phase of carpet python and a scrub python, a small arboreal python and a big arboreal python. Not eating the same things, doing different, living the same habitat side by side, but eking out existence differently at different trophic levels. In Iron Range, you have scrub python and you have green tree pythons, but no carpet pythons. Because again, the habitat supports a big python and a small arboreal python. It can't support a small, medium, and a large arboreal python. So you get to Iron Range, what do you have? You have like one side of the road, you'll have like a wall of, you've been there, haven't you?
No, I've never been.
Oh, you've got to go. You'll have like almost a wall of rainforest on one side of a dirt road and then just savanna on the other side of the road. There's no gradual transition. It doesn't fade into it. It's like just rainforest, stop, and there's a road and there's just savanna on the other side. And you will find chondros and scrubs on one side of the road and carpets on the other side of the road, but you won't find the carpets in the forest. You won't find the chondros. They're just like, they'll get right up to the edge of the rainforest, but not in it, because the job that they do, that position has already been filled by the green python. That niche partitioning happens, and that's why you get little tiny berm-like animals in those places. And it's like, this is obviously a unique thing. Why? Especially to hybridize something like the dwarf thing with the big thing. Dwarf is not a morph. That's not how that dwarfism works. Dwarf is mostly an environmentally constructed thing. There isn't anything big to eat, so you stay smaller. But if you take the thing that's the dwarf and you feed the shit out of it, it gets way bigger than it will. It's not genetically limited. It's mostly environmentally limited. If a dwarf population of something persists for a very long time, you'll see shifts. You'll see a trend towards smaller eggs and shorter incubation times. But if you feed the shit out of it, it'll get way bigger than you think. There was a guy in the town I lived in, had a 15-foot Jampia retic. It was fucking huge. Bigger than my thigh. It was this massive, massive thing. Because he believed, like a lot of those people believe, that they'll just stop growing, and they don't. That's not how indeterminate growth works. The same guy had a pair of Coyote retics. He had a trio of them, and I got the what turned out to be 2 females from him. They were 10 feet long. This is a population this is one of the quote-unquote super dwarf retics. These fucking things were 10 feet long and would eat guinea pigs because he was feeding them guinea pigs. And they just kept growing. They were happy to get 10 feet long. It's like ridiculous. Like it doesn't, what's the point of having of making a small, it's like you're thinking like, if you can make your dwarf retic, your Jampia retic 15 feet long by feeding the shit out of it, and you hybridize that with a mainland retic because you want albino retics that stay smaller, and you have a 15-foot adult, it's like you get to the point where like, this didn't make any fucking fuck all no difference in the adult size potential, because nothing you do will. You keep feeding food in one end, it keeps getting bigger its whole life. Growth will slow down at an earlier rate in some cases, but it won't ever arrest. Fun fact, indeterminate growth. Humans, our noses and ears are also indeterminate growers. Our bodies are sized, we're genetically limited in our height. You're only going to get as tall as your genes basically allow you to get for the most part. But our noses and ears never stop growing. So if you look at like really old dudes, they always got giant ears and giant bulbous noses. Because for whatever reason, our ears and noses never stop growing.
There you go. That's something I didn't know for sure.
So with the monitor, like an old dude, you're like, look at that giant, why is it big round nose and big ears?
Shame about the height with both of us. We could have done with a few extra inches.
Yeah. You know what? We're not. That's all sore subject. It's like, why don't we just like, when did like 6 foot tall become some magical benchmark? You know, that less than like 3% of all humans on Earth are 6 feet tall. 90%, 97% of men and virtually all women are under 6 feet tall. Worldwide global average 5'8". Exactly where I'm completely unremarkable. But somehow that has become short. Being completely normal has become less than. And what is normalized is being the freak top 3%.
Well, you're right over here. Indonesians are pretty short, so you must have felt pretty tall over here.
Yeah, but you cancel out. Yes, but then when you go to like, Scandinavia, 6 foot is pretty normal, is basically almost average baseline. So these things cancel each other out. You know, South Asia, everybody's very short. Other populations taller. Average global for an adult male human, 5'8".
Yeah, that's about
5'10" in the United States.
So going back to the monitors, another tricky topic we've got, and I'm sure I'll get some kickback for this, is we've got some populations like the water monitors that have got a locality and a morph, and they're a species all in one. So when a new morph arises, how do you go about breeding that? You know,
well, the single biggest driver of hybridization in the hobby and fucking up the gene pool is morphs.
Yeah.
Morphs have always been in the hobby, but there was a point at around the year 2000-ish when the hobby really lost its fucking mind. It went off the rails. And that was the exact moment when Peter Call proved out that the piebald ball python was heritable, recessive. It's not recessive. Anybody thinks that piebald ball is recessive, I got some land to sell you. It's not recessive. Piebald is never recessive. I don't give a shit what the species we're talking about is. It's always incomplete dominant. It can be subtle, but it's always incomplete dominant. At any rate, he proved it was heritable and sold them for $25,000 a piece and got it. He asked this insane amount of money, and people actually paid it. And that's when the ball python thing exploded. And then everybody's looking for morphs in everything. There had been morphs in other things before that, and they were more valuable, and they sold for decent money. But that was the point where everybody became obsessed with morphs as a get-rich-quick vehicle. And that's what has led to all manner of fuckery. Morphs are the only thing that matter. Everything is done for the sake of morphs, for the perceived riches that morphs will bring you. And so, you know, if you have a morph in a related species, and there's a more popular species that's a close relative, well, obviously you're going to breed the Colombian rainbow boa morphs into Brazilian rainbows because that's the prettier species. So of course you're going to do that because morphs, right? You have to. You're basically someone's basically holding a gun to your head. You really have no choice but to do that, except you do. Like it's like, so of course they're going to act irresponsibly. I mean, it's like I can't think of a single example of the hobby actually ever acting irresponsibly. If that's the case, if a morph pops out in one species and that species has close related species, even if they're not even prettier necessarily, but it just the existence of other related species, someone will do it. Look at all the short-tail python hybrids people made before morphs. Just bred Sumatrans to Borneos, and just why? Why would you even do that? Just because you can, because they can't help themselves. And then you mix a morph in there, and holy shit, like it's just. Well, of course you have to do that. You have to do that. You have to breed your granite spotted python to a children's python. You have to. You kind of have to. Do that. It's like, why? No, you absolutely don't have to do that. Like that's why. What were you hoping to accomplish? I would like this snake that averages 3.2 feet to be a little smaller. So I'm going to breed this snake that averages 3.0 feet. So it's like, and then maybe I'll have, so the 0.1, so I'll have an average length, maybe a 1 inch shorter, and be lighter colored and less distinctive pattern. Like that's why would you do that? There's no predictable outcome that would be even desirable, even if it didn't cause problems. Just purely on its merits, why are you doing that? What do you think is going to happen? It's like,
so if you've only got
brown, like
so if you've only got one of a morph, for example, a hypothetical, how would you treat that? Just wait until you get another one? Is there a way of proving a morph out when you've only got one of them and keeping it
tricky in that? Not if you only have one of them. I mean, it's like if you don't. Well, it depends. It's like if you had an animal from an island population, you can safely assume 99 times out of 100, unless it's an island that's like New Guinea or something like a more manageable island, you can assume probably that you have one contiguous breeding population. Generally speaking, if you had another animal from that population that looked different, then you're good to go. Figure it out. And there's a good example of this, and that's the Bell's phase lace monitors. It's like you don't it's a morph of lace monitor. You don't need to breed it to a fucking Nile monitor to figure that out, though. Like it's a species that also has two phases, i.e., a morph that exists. That's just a neutral. It's what you call a neutral mutation. It doesn't convey any benefit for survival, but it isn't detrimental either. So it just persists in the wild population. Oh, look, there's one of these. It's just out there. It works equally well. It's not selected for, but it's not selected against. So it just kind of coexists, but it's a mutation. And so there are examples of that. You don't need to breed it to some other species to prove it out. Again, this goes back to the be patient. You know, it's like if you don't know, when you get a new thing, and you know, obviously working at Prestasi, you see this stuff all the time. An animal will come in from a place, maybe a new place, and it's different, a little bit different. Maybe it's a lot different. Maybe it's not that different. You don't really know. If you get something from some new place, is it a morph? Is it a new species? Is it just a population that, you know, it's like you don't know. If your sample size is only one or two animals, like are they even typical of the wild population? If you only got one, what if it's just look at how many times, even with a captive bred clutch of whatever, you get an oddball one in the clutch. There's usually an odd one. What if that was the one that got collected, was the odd one? Would you base, it's like one animal is not enough to draw any firm conclusion about anything, much less that it's a morph and we got to hybridize it to prove it out. This is insane.
That's perfect. So going back to, like I said, I obviously work at Prestasi. I'm sat on like probably at least 4 new species of monitor, 2 species of Python. Do you think the best way of going around it is to not release those to the hobby and then get a good captive population of those and release them to try and get away with this? Or if someone's got the opportunity?
I mean, because of research I'm often involved in and whatnot, like I am aware of, I think we have, I mean, I wouldn't say we haven't scratched the surface of the species richness of like Indonesia. We've definitely scratched the surface. But we have found everything. There is a lot. There are a great many undescribed. I couldn't even fathom how many undescribed monitors there are. There is a lot. You might have 4 you're working with. Obviously we know there's a lot more than 4.
That's probably underestimating.
We will never live. You and I will die long before we discover all the monitors that are yet to be described in Indonesia. I'm aware of multiple python species in that part of the world that are probably 5 or 6 at least undescribed python taxa on some of these islands. It's like releasing things before they are properly quantified will cause problems. If you release one oddball thing and here's this one thing, people will do the dumb thing and just breed it to whatever they think, whatever they want. Maybe it's a morph, which is never a morph. It's like it's almost never a morph. The odds that one thing gets imported and the one that got collected happened to also be a wild free-ranging mutant are so astronomical. That's not the case. Like it's almost never the case. You can't say never. You never say never, but it's so statistically unlikely that it is not even worth entertaining that.
Well, especially when there's several others that have been seen as well. So
if you like those monitors, you breed them up, you do the research, you get them described. Then when you export the babies, you don't have the problem with hybridization because they will have value for what they are. Their value becomes not, I'm going to breed it. Maybe it's a morph. I'll breed it this other thing. Their value becomes, holy shit, there's a new species of monitor, and these are the first ones came in. They become very valuable and desirable, and that creates a market to keep them what they are. There's an incentive to preserve them. It's just a one animal here or there, it just incentivizes bad decisions, and especially it's unquantified. And even with the morph stuff, like this is like a huge pet peeve of mine. As someone who has proven out a few mutations, my own self, it is a long ass not difficult. Breeding snakes breeding reptiles really isn't that hard for the most part. Let's be honest. It is tedious and time consuming though, and it requires a great deal of patience. I've proven out 2 different Brettles python things, and one took 8 years, and one took 12 years. Because the generational time of that species is a little bit longer. It takes like getting on 4 years per generation. But and one I had a head start on because it would have taken 3 generations. It took 3 generations of breeding to conclusively show how something was inherited. And anything else is just jumping the gun. And what you see with people with the morph community is all too often, they see something weird, they assume it's hereditary, they breed it one time, and if they see anything that even vaguely resembles that, they assume, whoop, it's incomplete dominant, I've made it, I've proven it out, and they think they're done in one step. And you're not done at all. And there's been examples of that spectacularly blowing up in some people's faces. Morphs that don't, people, which is, in ball python land, there's several morphs I could list off. I won't go into it. In the ball python community, they already know. Morphs that you can buy that aren't even real. They're figments of people's imagination. You can buy one. It's got a cool, a couple got cool names. They don't actually exist, but because people are selling things on thoughts and prayers and wishful thinking. I want it to be this, therefore it must be the thing I want it because that thing is worth money to me.
Yeah.
It is a process. You have to almost prove something out by exclusion. You do every breeding combination you can, and you actually try to disprove your hypothesis. I think this is recessive. Then you try to disprove that. To prove out the stonewash thing, I started with 2 visuals and their parents. Now, automatically, you kind of, it's going to be recessive because the parents are not stonewashed, obviously, though the male was pretty faded. They were pretty much not stonewashed, obviously so, and the babies were very different. I got the project at that point. A lot of backstory, all that, but so I already kind of knew what it was going to be, but it still took me almost a decade, like 8 more years. I raised up those 2 baby visuals. I bred the parents again. They produced another batch with a few more visuals that were obviously night and day different. Okay, again, confirms it's recessive. Then I raised up those original 2 animals. I bred them to an unrelated bloodline of Brettles pythons that couldn't possibly carry that gene and produced all normals. So I did head to head, I did visual to normal, and then I raised up to finally put the nail in the coffin. I raised up the putative hets from the outcrossing from the visuals, raised them up and bred them again. A second generation of normal produced visuals again. And at that point, I started selling them. It's like, that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
If you have a small gene pool, you don't know. If you have a small gene pool from some island and you think you have a morph, like it can be difficult because you have things where that gene, it might be a morph, but it might be that it's so common in that gene pool that most of the population are heterozygous anyway. Look at Tannenbar pythons. The most common Tannenbar python that comes out that ever gets imported are exanthic patternless. It's a double recessive. That would be like if a snow ball python was the most commonly wild caught animal, was a double recessive. There's a lot of reasons why that's the case with those guys. But to date, I am unaware of even a single captive breeding ever where an animal that was gold or patterned gold or whatever that did not prove to be at least a double het. Every animal that isn't visual for exanthic or patternless always proves to be heterozygous at the least for those, because they're that common in that environment. Those genes are slowly, if you were to fast forward another 100,000 years, the gold pattern ones won't exist anymore. They will all be patternless silver snakes. And you see examples of this where mutations take over a population so completely to where they're just all that. Look at green tree pythons and the red baby, yellow baby thing. Yellow baby chondros are just a simple recessive mutation that started in the southern portion of the range. Probably not in Australia. Australia appears to be an extraliminal population of a New Guinea species. So probably somewhere in southern Papua at some point, a mutation, because red chondros have to turn yellow before they can turn green. So at a scale by scale basis, they turn yellow and then the yellow turns to green. They can't go from red to green directly. They have to go through this intermediate stage, which is frankly why chondro people love those red babies, because they take a long time. They're in a color change for a couple of years and they look really freaking crazy during that time while this process plays out. Yellow is boring because yellow jumps from yellow to green. Sometimes I bred chondros a few times, and I had a yellow baby that turned 70% green overnight while I slept. Went to bed with a yellow baby, got up, and it was mostly green. You could see some yellow on the underneath, kind of peeking out from underneath, but it was like just one night it turned mostly. Took a while to get the final to completely turn green, but that's not as exciting as something that takes 2 years and has red, yellow, blue, black, and white all at the same time all crazy calico looking, which is why they love those red babies so much. But ultimately, if being red works as a baby and being green works better as an adult, the yellow mutation is favored and selected for because it streamlines that process where you're less vulnerable. You can go directly to green. You skip all that other bullshit where you might be more vulnerable looking like all calico looking and go straight to green, which offers some protection and survival benefit. So it's selected for, which is why now it's taken over all of the southern populations and is now working its way around the north. And you can see which way it went. It went west, up and over, and now it's headed back east across the top. And eventually it will completely take over everything because as it has in the south, because it works better. And then some future herper in 300,000 years, if we're still around, will never even know that red babies ever existed. They just have yellow babies. That's just the thing. Sometimes you see these sort of evolutionary processes, and we come in, humans come out of the scene in the middle of a process that's ongoing, and we don't recognize it for what it is. These mutations that pop out, to bring it back to your more monitor-centered audience, like the black dragons. Oh, it's recessive. It's like, that's evolution. That's evolution trying this out. Does being all black work? And if all black works, they're not all black from this population, are they? Or are they all black from that population where they're from?
They're all black from that population, yeah.
Because the all black worked. So it's still a mutation, but it took over completely and it becomes the new baseline normal for this population. All these mutations that pop out, it doesn't matter if it's a ball python or a monitor or whatever, it doesn't matter, a corn snake, it doesn't matter. These are random mutations that might convey benefit or be a detriment. And if they're selected for or they're selected against, we always select for them because we think it's interesting to noodle around with. But nature's always doing these things. That's the purpose of this. Morphs are just evolutionary processes. And when you pop up in the wild, there's things that maybe it's too early to tell whether it's going to be beneficial. Obviously, there's no beneficial population of albinos of anything. That's obviously detrimental. But a lot of this,
you got the Hog Island boas that are sort of hypo looking, aren't they? They're pretty much
an incomplete dominant hypo. It is just a different, incompatible form of hypomelanism. There's a weird phenomenon on islands. Everybody's familiar with insular dwarfism, and some people are familiar with insular gigantism. But there's also a weird phenomenon I've stumbled onto of insular hypomelanism, at least in regards to reptiles. Where you get island populations that are pale and lose pigment, and I don't know why. I give you like 5 examples, like Hog Island boas, obviously, Pearl Island boas, another kind of, why are these boas kind of hypo looking on this island? Not on the mainland. Genetically, a Hog Island boa really isn't 2 shits different from a mainland Honduran boa, but on this island, for whatever reason, this island ecosystem being hypomelanistic worked better and took over the entire population. If you look on, there's a population of kind of hypomelanistic looking spotted pythons on an island off Queensland where all the spotted pythons are kind of hypos. Why? Why does being hypo on a small island work? If you look out in some of the islands, you get to like Kofiau, where we didn't unfortunately get a chance to get to, but you have scrub pythons and you have chondros on those islands, and the chondros retain yellow as adult. As you know, some of them anyway are adult yellow animals, which is, you could argue, is hypomelanism. Why are you so light as an adult now? And if you look
green ones are hypo-y looking. They're not like a vivid
it's like
green.
Green. It's like you had a yellow snake that you took green spray paint and just misted dusted some yellow and it settled green on settled on the top, but you can see like yellow underneath kind of come out. It isn't right. Why are they hypomelanistic chondros on these islands? If you look at the scrub pythons from Kofiau, they're not normal either. A normal, like at a Barnack type scrub python, usually the width of the light pattern elements and dark pattern elements, the ratio is skewed towards dark pattern elements. They're basically a dark snake with light bands. And you get to Kofiau, and they are a light snake with dark bands. The light bands are so wide that they're basically a light snake reversed. They're like a lighter snake with darker banding, which would be a trend towards hypomelanism because the overall amount of melanin released is less. And why? What about these living on island ecosystems favors being lighter in color? I have no it's an observable phenomenon. I could just give a bunch of examples of. I have no idea. I can't even postulate why that would give an advantage. I can't even, don't even know. And why in some, well, some of those, I assume the black dragons are from an island, aren't they?
Yep.
And Bakara, and all black. There's a lot of like all black monitors on islands. Like, why is being a jet black as a lizard work, but being a snake being hypomelanistic works? Like, why in these small situations, like, why does this keep happening? So, I don't know, but it's a thing.
Very interesting.
Small populations, though, one of the reasons is small populations of a beneficial mutation. It's why they speciate. You see island species all the time, because if a beneficial mutation arises, it spreads throughout the whole population because your population is smaller and everybody's breeding with their close relatives. So it allows beneficial mutations to proliferate through a population very quickly. So if you had an incomplete dominant form of hypomelanism where the first generation offspring are hypo and the second generation are even more hypo, it doesn't take long, because if there's a survival benefit to being a hypo boa on Hog Island, it's like all the babies from that original hypo, half of them are going to be hypos. Boom. Guess who survives disproportionately to reproduce? The second generation, them. And it just very quickly can take over in a small population. Whereas the mainland population is getting a lot longer for that to take over, because you have little isolated populations here and there, partly isolated. It would take a longer time to do that.
Yeah. So to sort of close it up, we're coming up to 2 hours now. I've got some hard-hitting questions for you at the end. I've got another question in the chat. I don't know what to say. I think there's room for this locality breeding and keeping things pure alongside morphs and doing it. How would you? There's like a sense of gratitude, or I don't know, there's like a sense of responsibility in doing the right thing. I think that we're maybe lacking. I think that's where me and you agree on this and find it so passionate. And then there's other people that just don't seem to care so much. Maybe just explain why you think it's important to do what we've been sort of talking about tonight.
Absolutely. I think you basically said it. I feel personally a great deal of responsibility to do what I can do as an individual to preserve these things for future generations. I've been in this hobby a long ass time, since the earliest 90s, and I have watched all these changes. I've watched the morph craze. I've watched all this stuff play out. And I've seen the good that's come to the hobby, and I've seen the downside that's come to the hobby. And the downside is not to be overlooked. Like, it's been a substantial downside. And this is one of the major areas of that. I look at it like this, like, we stand on the shoulder of giants, is the old expression. Yeah. I got in the hobby in the early to mid 90s in a serious way. And the hobby had existed a long time before I got into it, and it was pretty awesome. There was this amazing hobby. All this stuff was going on, and people were breeding all this stuff, and I benefited from that. I just took what those people did and kept it going. It did what I did. History will judge that later, I suppose. But, I got to enjoy an awesome hobby because people left me an awesome hobby. And I think a lot of people don't ever think about what their legacy will be in this hobby, because there will be people in this hobby after you're gone. There'll be people after I'm gone. Will the people that come next in the next generations of hobbyists, are they going to look back at your contribution, what you did? Are they going to look at that favorably? Did you make the hobby better? Did you make the hobby worse? And if you made the hobby worse, why are you doing that? Why would you do that? Purely because your own sort of selfish sort of ends. I just want to do what I want to do, and I really don't care what comes after that. Like, that seems very, I don't know. I find that irresponsible. I want to do what I can do to leave the hobby as good as I fucking found it. You know what I mean? That's it, or better if that's at all possible. That's I don't want my legacy to be a bunch of hybrid morph carpets that no one gives a crap about. I don't want that to be what I remembered for. I mean, because that's not going to be. No one's going to look back at like, oh man, I'm sure glad those guys hybridized all those bearded dragons so I can never get a pure Pagona barbata again. I'm sure glad they did that. No one's ever going to say that. They're going to lament the fact that they have no ability to even have a Pagona barbata because previous generations took that choice away from them because of the choices that they made. So
definitely.
And I have made hybrid carpets, inadvertently made hybrid carpets and sold them because over time you learn more, and though not intentionally, it's like the split between northern and southern coastals being different at the species level. That is only about 8 years we've even known that, and that's only because of more recent genetic testing. Prior to that, even genetic testing didn't show that, because you're looking at mitochondrial, like a couple mitochondrial genes, and normal old school taxonomy. I mean, we did not know. These were firmly believed to be the same thing. So you're breeding within this population, and you find out, oh, that's not even, there's more to them. These are actually two different things, and this is where they stop and start. And so, but not being perfect, you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You do the best you can with what you have available to you, whether that's the animals or the information you have. It's like, if you get new information, you might have turned out you were wrong. Like, so I gave the example where I was wrong. It's like, that might happen, but that's not an excuse to not do the best you can. You should always try to do the best you can, be as responsible as you can. You might turn out that something was misunderstood or whatever, and you might have inadvertently made some mistake, but that's no excuse to just not even try. And that's my philosophy on it. Other people will no doubt hate on me for it, but I'm like, I'm not gonna. I'm gonna do my best to leave the areas where the sandbox I play in. I'm gonna leave it in as good a position as I possibly can. Yeah. I breed things as pure as anybody can possibly figure. I mean, at this point, I keep ridiculous ancestry records of everything back to the dawn of time. I sell these snakes and I give people the ancestry with it, hoping that they will keep that going in the future generations and stuff. It's like, I did all the homework on the backstory. Just keep this going. As a hobbyist, if someone got into this stuff now, with these lineages around for 35, 40 years, they would never be able to uncover all that backstory and figure all that out. I'm only able to do that because I'm just so damned old. I have been doing this so long and keeping this up for so long that I predate the period of time where it got all screwed up in the late 90s. Like, I'm just older than that. So I know those people and they're able to get that stuff and just keep these things going for that long. So it would be really difficult for someone to do what I do now, starting from scratch now. But they don't have to. You just like, it's very frustrating. Like,
100%. Yeah, and the funniest thing, I mean, we've really bashed on the chondro community, is keeping lineages of hybrids for 50 years or what have they been doing. And I'm going to get so much trouble. MJ is going to ring me.
I don't get that on a fundamental level. I get the keeping the ancestry records and all that, and it's kind of a bit of like reptile history, and that's cool. This snake is part of this lineage that goes all the way back to 1973 or whatever. That's pretty cool.
So good at it.
I get that, but then I don't get the, like, well, why couldn't you just do that with pure ones? Like, I don't get like being that detail oriented about what you paired with what, but then exclusively only pairing things that aren't the same snake. I don't get that. That's a weird disconnect to me. To be that detail oriented on one side and that completely, utterly not detail oriented on the other side, I don't understand it. I don't want to bash on. I have friends that are chondro people. I know some very cool dudes who are chondro people. I tell them all this stuff. This is not breaking news to them. They know how I feel. I don't understand. I don't like. It seems like it doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to me. But I have never seen a hybrid chondro that could hold a candle to the best. Think of the best Aru you've ever seen come through Pristossi, and you're probably like, "Holy shit! Look at that!" Like, show me the hybrid chondro that's more than 5 years old that looks better than that Aru that you just pictured in your mind that you had to go through there. Probably didn't hold a candle to it, did it?
No, it didn't. It doesn't have.
They never do.
Turn green, don't they?
They almost always kind of 99% of them end up like the 95% green, when the remaining 5% is a mixture of black, blue, and white sprinkles. Maybe a bit of yellow. It's just like a sprinkling of these other things on a green snake. That's where most roads always seem to lead. Like, but think of the best Biak adult you've ever seen. You're like, holy crap, it's crazy. They're always the locality ones. The best examples of locality, i.e. species of chondros, almost always are more extreme looking than the mixed ones when they get to the 5-year mark. The mixed ones look really crazy because they're always red babies and they always go through these prolonged, drawn out color changes. So for 2, 3, 4 years, you might have a really whacked out looking snake, but show me when it's 10 years old. It's going to be probably 95% green. Like, that's kind of where they tend to end up. Whereas, I don't know.
Well,
I have to get Chondros again because I need to breed the other 3 species of them for my little Lion contest. So it's killing me.
We won't be getting invited to Chondro Fest, will we?
No, I've never. Funny enough, I've never been invited. Right? Never. I'm not.
That's such a good example because of what we've been talking about. Because you had this locality thing that then ended up new species, and then it's been a bit of a mess. So that's why we've used them so heavily on this.
Frustrating to me is it was always obvious they were different species. Like it was never. Did you ever think? I think Biak is clearly the same thing as a Roo. It's like, are you kidding me? It's like. One's an island on here, and then you have this big island in the middle with no ocean currents that connect these things to this way. You're literally, and then you have to cross the Wallace line. It's like, what? And then like you've got and then another island over here. It's like, but yeah, no. And they look totally different. They're different sizes. They look completely different. Their attitudes are different.
Yeah, the head structure.
Because they're freaking different. Like you don't need somebody to write a paper to tell you that's a different state. It's like, here's a simple rule. I think Ryan told me this. I think it goes back to Tracy Barker, but basically it's like 99 times out of 100. If you can hand me like 10 of something and I can tell you which one's which, like it's because it's a different species. If you can just look at it and tell reliably, like, oh, if I gave you 100 Arus and 100 Biaks and they were all mixed together in a big barrel, and then I said, here, put them in these 2 baskets, one for the Arus and one for the Biaks, what do you think your score would be? Probably 100%, wouldn't it? You'd probably be basically 100%. You'd be 100% spot on every damn time. And if you can do that, it's because they're different species. They're obviously different species. It's like they're not. Why would you ever think these are the same thing, other than because you want to believe they're the same thing?
Yeah.
And that's the only reason you can come to that conclusion.
This is an easy one for you, Nick. Very short answer, I'd imagine. It's from Timothy. We got in the chat there. Any thoughts on breeding Duns pythons to Macalot pythons?
I think Timothy's a friend. I think he's just being a smart ass. I think he knows the answer. There was a guy in Indo that posted a picture of a Duns python breeding a Macalot python, and somebody asked him in broken English, asked him like, "Why are you doing that?" And the answer was like, "Because hybrid." I was like, because hybrid. Like, why? What do you possibly think is gonna? He's gonna have a bunch of like.
That's one you did nearly lose. Like that was, if people did just treat them like Macalots, you would have lost them in the States pretty easy.
You effectively did lose them in the States. There was like 5 animals still clinging to life that were 1.5 million years old. Of those, like 4 of them, there were 4. 3 of them were from the original import, and there were like 30-year-old animals that were like 1 billion-year-old from the original import back in the late 90s. One was an F1 animal that was like 15 years old. Ryan managed to get those animals not long after I got the group from Europe. But to get the group from Europe, I found a guy in Wales that had a pair of them from that same time period, the late 90s. They were 1 million years old. I kept like, you got to breed them. You got to breed them for like a decade. And he finally bred them, and he got 5.5 or 4.4 rather. And I got the whole clutch. It worked out to be 4.4. And I brought all of them in, and then Ryan got those. So now that the one F1 male that's unrelated from a bazillion years ago is at my house to breed my unrelated F1s and whatnot. So this is, but yeah, they were basically lost in the U.S. And now are just continuously exist again.
Yeah, that's a great sense of achievement that you and Ryan and the other guys that are involved in that project must have now. Do you know what I mean? And like
I wish I had a little more luck. I mean, I bred them, but it's like I wish I could breed them more reliably. But now, like 2 people that got babies from me and Ryan they've got eggs this year. And me and Ryan didn't. But 2 people who got offspring from our efforts bred them. So it's like they exist. And I think that's, to me, that's the kind of, that's the legacy I want to leave, and the contribution I want to make is to be that guy, not the, some of this other stuff. I will also point out that I am a complete dumbass, and I only just now realized that there's a button that says comments for all comments, and now I can see all the chat comments. I literally just saw this whole time. I had no idea. I'm not very technical.
Well, you'll definitely be back on, Nick, and thank you. I hope people have enjoyed it. I've got these few little questions at the end that we'll get through. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on. As always, I can sit there and listen to you. It's like listening to a podcast when I'm speaking to you anyway. So it's a pleasure. Hopefully, people get something from it. I've got a few little questions at the end. what would you personally like to see change in the next 10 years of reptile breeding?
I would like to see Australia and Papua New Guinea's export laws change. Now, if we turn our eyes to things that could realistically happen, I would like to see, and I see some cautious optimism, not a lot, maybe a little bit. I would like to see the mindset of the hobby change. I think that I won't say the collapse of the ball python industry, but the definite like downturn, and it's not going to bounce back like it did. Like, I can't imagine a future where ball pythons aren't the most commonly bred reptile and the most popularly kept animal. They're just too perfect for captivity, temperament, size, every shape, every color you can imagine exists. They're always going to be the most popular thing, and that's fine. But the idea that I'm going to be able to quit my job and breed snakes for a living with having 4 female ball pythons, and I'm going to make 3 clutches of eggs and I'll pay all my bills for a year, that dream is basically dead. And that is a good thing. I think that this over-reliance on morphs as like some sort of get-rich-quick sort of mentality has been so detrimental to the hobby. It has robbed people of their appreciation for what things are supposed to be and look like. You know, there's again, I hate to bring everything back to carpet pythons, but these are the examples that pop up in my mind. And this is a breeder who's no longer in the hobby, but for a while, one of the biggest carpet python breeders in the world, in Germany, didn't even own any inland carpets. Here's a whole species of carpet that, mind you, is kind of a natural exanthic looking game that has blue on it. It's blue.
Fantastic, yeah.
They're amazing. They're small. They're beautiful. They're docile. They're hardy. I love them. And never even owned any. And when asked, it said, because there aren't any morphs. That's the mindset we need to kill. They're just not, why would I even bother? It's like you got 300 adult carpet pythons, but you can't have a pair inland carpets because it's a dead end because there are no morphs. Why can't you just appreciate this beautiful insular inland population of isolated carpets that are blue because they're what they are? Why does appreciation and value only get attributed to things that are mutants? Why can't we just like things the way they are? It doesn't mean you can't also like morphs. I breed a shitload of morph animals. I also breed a shitload of non-morph animals. If I had to choose one or the other, I'd lose all the morphs in about 10 seconds, but I don't have to. It's my job, so I can have all of it. But like, there's nothing wrong with liking morphs and noodling around and breeding morphs. But if you only get the mindset where things are only valuable and can only be appreciated if they're a mutant, and they're not worth your time if they're not a mutation, that's a mindset that's something we should improve as a hobby collectively. You know, it's like, there's no bigger crime in the world of ball pythons than being a normal ball python. You are I mean, in some cases, you might be sentenced to death for the crime of not being a mutant. Like, that's insane to me that's where we've gotten to the point where you might just euthanize perfectly healthy, normal ball pythons for not being a morph or not having the right morphs, you know, or this kind of stuff. Like, that's gone way too far. I think, like, a lot of these things, all these things are fascinating. All these things are beautiful in their own way, naturally. A morph is not, people need to stop looking at morphs as an improvement. They are not better than, they are only different than. This is what it's supposed to look like, generally speaking. This is outside that in the range of variation. It's this other thing. It's not better than the baseline. It is just different than the baseline. And that's a better way to look at it. Quit looking at like it's automatically better because it's a mutant. It's not. It's just different. Okay. Like a more balanced hobby.
If you had control over the hobby, which I'm sure you would love, what would you ban and what would you protect at all costs?
What would I ban and what would I protect at all costs? I'll throw it out for Gary Chavino, and I'd ban Carpondros. I don't care about Carpondros. They're functionally sterile anyway, for the most part, so they don't really cause any problems. I don't know. I think that, I don't know. What would I ban? It's like you just bait me with the questions and make me the least popular guy in herpetoculture. What would you ban?
I'm sure there's some people we haven't offended enough yet, mate.
I'm telling you. Well, every area of the hobby has these problems. There's no area that's completely, I mean, I don't know anything about dart frogs. there's a whole dart frog hobby. I'm going to go out on a limb and I bet there's some dingling hybridizing dart frogs. I bet there is. I'd be shocked if there was. There's a bunch of them. There probably is. I have no idea. I'm sure someone else does. I'm sure that's a thing. It's a problem with dart frog people. Like, I think that I don't know. I'm not much for banning things. I'm a big believer in free will, and people are free to make choices. I also believe in shaming people for making bad ones, though. But I mean, that's like I wouldn't want to tell somebody they couldn't do anything, but I might point out to them that they're fucking up. Like that's no problem with that. Like, freedom of choice is not freedom from consequence. As far as what would I protect at all costs, a lot of these, there's too many species to enumerate. But the sorts of the things we're talking about on this, so you have these small populations that, I mean, just think about the probability that you're going to get a freaking scrub python or something from some ridiculous, let's just say Batanta. It's like the odds that you're going to get a pair of animals and be able to work with a pair of animals from some tiny ass island in the most remote place on the freaking planet, and you're going to get those all the way to the US or Europe or whatever, and you're going to get them to breed and be able to work with that. That is such an unlikely series of events. That is worth preserving. That is so, what are the odds that's ever going to happen again? It's like, it's so unlikely that you're going to get that from some of these places. It's like that's something that's worth preserving. I mean, these animals are different on these islands for a reason. They are those differences that's the sum total of all the changes that occurred to them once they got to this island that made them what they are. That's why they're unique. And so to put them into some giant genetic meat grinder, breeding them to other things to make some sort of sausage, genetic sausage, what is the point of that? You took this unique population and bred to something else, and in doing so, you literally destroyed every single thing that made that thing unique in the first place. Everything that made it what it was, why it was, and its whole evolutionary story to get to that point on that island. The minute you hybridize that thing with something else for something trivial like a morph, or just to see if you could do it, you just destroyed everything that made it special. It's all gone. And for what? And what did you get? Probably something unremarkable. It's an entirely destructive process. It's not a creative process. It is.
Perfect.
Like
well, then I think we've annoyed everyone. My last question is: are you going to be joining Ryan on another trip which will not be named?
The trip, I will. Yeah, it is my. I mean, if it is at all humanly possible for me to go on the trip that shall not be named to the undisclosed location to look for the unknown things, hell yes. I'm getting old. I'm older than all of you. I am beat up. You might have noticed. Like I'm an old ass man. Like life is short, man, and I'm constantly being reminded. You see your peers and your friends and your family, people dying off, and it's like you see these things happen, and you remind yourself like you don't have forever. And if you're going to go to some really remote place, it's not easy to get to. It's difficult. It's physically demanding. It beats the shit out of your body. I can't do these trips when I'm 70. I don't have. If you do this once every year or every couple of years, how many trips like that Papua trip, how many of those do I have left in my body? Am I physically capable of doing if I do one every year or two before I get to be too old to do it anymore? And the answer comes up. It's variable, but it's not very damn many. So you better get busy living or get busy dying. Like, yeah, I'm gonna make it happen. Like I can go to Greece and go to Europe when I'm 70. I can do that kind of trip later. This hard trekking, camping in freaking tidal mangrove swamps full of mosquitoes and getting eaten alive by so many mosquitoes, you quit trying to flick them off. You just watch them do their thing because there's no point because there's 27 other ones biting you at the same time anyway. Doing that kind of stuff, you know, that's a finite window of time you get to do that. You're physically capable of doing that. You're a young dude, so you got a little more years.
Oh, mate, after that last trip, mate, I was like, that might have been the last one. I was in the hospital 2 weeks afterwards.
Yeah, no, I've been saying like it is super important to me to get out there and do and see those things and those places. Yeah, myself while I'm still able to do it. So I will. I think if it is at all possible for me to make it happen, it is my intent.
Yeah, and I think it ties nicely into what we've been speaking about is get out there, and it might give you a bit of appreciation for the natural morphs and species and localities that we are speaking about.
That's always like the funniest thing to me. Like people they think they're like, I got this bioactive cage and I've recreated a piece of nature. It's like, no, you haven't. Is your cage 50 feet tall? You know where you find big scrub pythons and big monitors? About 50 feet off the ground. Like, they go, everybody knows, oh, they go up into the canopy where it's safe. Yeah, that's where the canopy is, like 50 feet off the ground. Like, they're not like 3 feet off the ground. It's like your chondro, it's like, it's like 50 feet up. That's why when you walk through the forest, you don't just bump into chondros bumping you in the head, because they're not that low. They're way up there. And those big trees don't even have branches that low. It's like people don't really get that. So I think naturalistic cages look awesome. I'm definitely a fan of that. If you have the space, it sure looks cool, but you're not really replicating things. You kind of only realize that when you actually go there.
That's the last subsect of the hobby now. I've got that on the list. The bioactive keepers. We've annoyed them now, Nick. But thank you so much for coming on, mate. I think we've done a lot. So yeah, thank you very much, mate. Like I said, hope everyone listening enjoyed it. Something a bit different. Hope everyone enjoys Monitor Fest, which is going on today or tomorrow. But yeah, big thanks, Nick, and I'll see you again soon, mate.
Anytime.